Welcome to Taking the Biz, the channel for A-level business students just like you. If you're only just finding the channel, where have you been? And why not consider subscribing and hitting the bell so that you'll get notifications when new videos become available. Now, speaking of videos, in today's, which is just for Edexcel A-level business students, we're going to be examining how you might tackle 20-mark essays when you get them in your exams. So 20-mark essays in Edexcel A-level business exams all tend to follow the same kind of structure. They'll present a business that has got two different issues, two different strategies that it's considering using. It's always a bit of a dilemma for the business in the question. Should they go with strategy A or strategy B? Should they make this decision or should they make that decision? And the question that we've got on screen is no different. It's about Spotify, which is a business that many students might subscribe to themselves or at least be familiar with. And the question that we've got is Spotify is aiming to extend the product lifecycle of its music streaming business. Spotify could either focus on marketing strategies in existing markets such as Europe and the USA, or expand into emerging markets such as those in Asia. And our question is evaluate these two options and recommend which one is most suitable for Spotify to extend the product lifecycle of its music streaming business. Now, we know that when we get any kind of question in an Edexcel exam, we'll have some case studies or some extracts about a business that we can use to help us in our response. We're not going to spend a lot of time in this video going through those extracts in detail. Maybe if you wish, you can pause the video and have a read of them before you go on. But we're going to launch straight into how we might actually try and approach this question and how we might try and structure a 20-mark essay. So let's just go over the basics first of all. What is a 20-mark essay about? What's important to show? Well, the key word in Edexcel in those longer questions is the word balance. Edexcel love balance. And what that means is that the examiner is not looking for a response that's quite one-sided. They're not looking for you to paint a big argument as to why one option's great and another argument saying why the other option is terrible. Edexcel want a balanced response. They want you to talk about the pros and cons of both ideas, not from the outset just be completely biased towards one option, not just point out all of the good points about option one and all of the negatives of option two. They're looking for more of a balanced response than that. We know that Edexcel also really want their answers to be in context. They want them to be applied to the specific business that they've asked the question on. In our essay, we're looking at Spotify. So we've got to try and make our answer link to Spotify. We've got to make it suitable for that business, for their circumstances, for the markets that they're in, for the problems or the dilemmas that they're facing. We don't want our answer to be generic. We don't want to give an answer that could apply to any business in the world. We want to focus on giving an answer that is in the context of the business that's in the case study. We also know that in 20-mark essays, there's two exam skills that we've really got to show the examiner that we have mastered. That is analysis, which means explaining the consequences, the impacts, the ramifications of our ideas. Not just making points, but making points and going on and explaining how they might affect the business, what they might mean for the organisation. And in 20-mark essays, we've also got to make sure that we show the examiner the skill of evaluation. We've got to make decisions. We've got to show judgment. We've got to try and balance up two competing ideas. We've got to present the pros and the cons of each. We've also got to try and arrive at a verdict. What should this business do? What's the right course of action for, in this essay, Spotify to follow? So let's have a look at how we might try and structure this 20-mark essay then. Keeping balance as the word that's going to be at the forefront of our minds here. We've got to make sure that it is a balanced argument that we give. So we want to try and provide equal coverage of both arguments. To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to take option A. In this case, that's Spotify trying to extend their product portfolio, but doing so by continuing to target its existing markets of Europe and America. Now, we've got to put forward the benefits of doing that, the strengths of it, why that would be good for Spotify, but we've also got to put forward an equal and balanced argument as to why there might be limitations to doing that as well, the positives and the negatives. We're then going to take option 2 and we're going to try and give it the same kind of coverage. We're going to put forward the strengths of option 2, in this case, targeting emerging markets such as Asia. And then we're going to try and put forward the limitations as well. So you can think of the first part of our essay coming in 4 parts. We're going to take option 1 and we're going to dissect the strengths and limitations of going for option 1. Then we're going to take option 2 and we're going to dissect the strengths and limitations of that. The 5th part of our answer is going to be our conclusion. We've got to reach a verdict, a judgment, a decision at the end of our essay. So we can think of 20 markers as really being in 5 different parts. Now let's have a look at one of the paragraphs we might write in a 20-mark essay. It's important to try and start with a strong point at the beginning of any paragraph. Let's have a look at this one. It says, extending the life cycle of Spotify's music streaming business by continuing to target existing markets such as Europe and North America is the lower cost option. So we start our paragraph off by saying, okay, let's look at option 1. We continue to target North America and Europe and try to extend the product life cycle for Spotify's music streaming by staying in the same markets that they've always been in. What's the good about that? Why is that a strategy that might have some potential for the business? Well, it's going to be lower cost. That's our point. So get a point in your paragraph and put it front and centre. Make it clear to the examiner, hey, here's option 1 and here's a benefit of it. And I'm going to put this right as a real strong point at the start of my paragraph. Then we can go on to analyse it, to try and explain it a little bit. And what we might say is that Spotify has a strong brand in these markets and an understanding of the needs of these customers. This means Spotify can extend its product life cycle without needing to invest as much in market research and promotions as they might do if they were targeting new markets such as Asia. This makes it a less risky strategy. But we need more impacts than that. We need more consequences than that if we can. So let's go further. So this lowers Spotify's costs and creates funds that can be used for R&D into new features that might prolong the life cycle of its music streaming service. Things such as adding virtual reality to its music streams. And we've taken that idea of adding virtual reality to music streams from one of the extracts in the case studies, just to keep it in context and applied. But let's go further. We can give more analysis than that. So this improves quality and customer experience, helping retain customers and attract new ones. We could go further still. This should extend the life cycle of Spotify's music streaming service at a fraction of the cost of targeting emerging markets. Now, lower costs are important to Spotify as they prepare for their stock market flotation. And again, in that last line, we've taken another thing from the case study, from one of the extracts, and we just use that as a little bit of context that we sprinkled into our answer in order to keep it applied. But as soon as we've built that argument up, as soon as we've said what the benefit is of continuing to target those traditional markets of Europe and the USA, we then want to try and knock that answer down again. So what are the limitations of that? We've said what's good about it, but we want balance here. We want to have a look at the good and the negative, the limitations as well. So we could say, however, extending the life cycle by continuing to target those existing markets of Europe and North America is challenging because of the greater competition Spotify face from rivals such as Apple Music, compared to the competition in emerging markets such as Asia. So again, we move into paragraph or section 2 of our essay. This time we're trying to give the limitations of option 1, having already spelt out the advantages. And we want to get a really strong point front and centre of the paragraph. We're going to face greater competition if we go with this strategy. Now, we then want to get going on the analysis again. So we say this degree of competition may mean that, and we could go on to explain how being in a more competitive environment might impact on Spotify, what it might mean for them, what the consequences might be. But once we've had a look in detail at the strengths and the limitations of option 1, it's time to get onto the third paragraph, the third section of our essay. Let's have a look at option 2. And again, we want to follow the same kind of format. We could set out the limitations of it afterwards, but we want to go with a strength of it. Why is this a good reason, or why is this a good strategy for Spotify to follow? So let's have a look at what we could say. We could say, trying to extend the product lifecycle by targeting emerging markets this time in Asia has the advantage of offering greater growth potential. It's a simple point, but it's a strong one. This is because emerging markets have less saturated music streaming markets, meaning Spotify face less competition for the large number of potential customers in developing nations. So now we've got a third point that we've introduced into our essay. We've gone with option 1 and said, here's a strength, here's a limitation. Now we go with option 2 and we say, hey, this has got a strength too. Look at this, it's got huge growth potential. Think of some of those emerging markets in Asia that Spotify could target. Think of a country like China or India, huge emerging markets. Think of the growth potential that's got for Spotify. That's my point. That's what I'm going to go with for the start of this section. But then we want to analyse. So we say this might lead to, and we talk about all the things that growth potential might mean. What would it mean for the extension of the product life cycle? Then what would it mean financially for Spotify? What might it mean to their revenue, to their profits, to the dividends that they might be able to offer? So we can talk about how that might be a really good strategy for Spotify to try and pursue. But then we've got to knock it down again. Then we go into the limitations. We could say, however, although emerging markets such as Asia offer Spotify less competition, consumers in those nations may not have the disposable incomes that are as high as consumers in Europe and North America. So yes, these emerging markets might be huge. They might have huge growth potential. They might have really large populations. But do they have disposable incomes that are as high as consumers in other parts of the world? So it's a limitation that Spotify need to be aware of if they're going to go for that strategy. Then we go into the analysis again because of this. And we might explain what this might mean for Spotify. What would it mean for their marketing strategies? What would it mean for their pricing strategies? Are they going to be able to price their music streaming as highly as they might do in North America and Europe? And if they can't, what are the consequences for that? What does it mean for their revenue streams? What might it mean for their profits? What might it say about the quality of product that they're offering? What kind of perception or difference to the image and brand name might that create? So we go through our analysis and then we get on to the fifth and final section of our essay, the conclusion, where we've got to make a judgment, where we've got to decide what should this business do. So let's take a look at how we might conclude here. We can say in conclusion, if Spotify are looking to extend the life cycle of their music streaming service, then continuing to target Europe and North America is the better option in the short term, as it carries less risk. There's our reason. Why are we going to pick one thing over the other? Well, we're going to pick option 1. It's less risky. Now, this might be attractive to Spotify at a time when they are gearing up for a stock market flotation. So we've got our reason, but we've justified it. Hey, Spotify want to become a PLC. They want to float their business on the stock exchange. Do they want to be taking huge risks in their strategies right now at a time when they're trying to go public? So in the short run, at least, this is why North America and Europe might be the preferred option. But we could say, however, the size of the emerging markets in Asia and their growth potential means this might be a better long-term method of prolonging the life cycle. It is riskier due to the greater financial investment required, but it offers the opportunity for a more long-lasting extension to Spotify's streaming service. So we could say that option A might be the safer option in the short run. That might be really appealing. But if Spotify have got more focus on long-termism, if they are planning for the future, if they are really serious about prolonging the life cycle of the music streaming for a significant number of years, then maybe option 2 might be better in the long run. Maybe those emerging markets offer the chance to extend the life cycle for many more years, whereas continuing to target North America and Europe might target or might improve the life cycle for a lesser amount of time. So that's how we might go through the 5 different sections of a 20 marker. We know that time has got to be tight. So we might want to try and allow ourselves more than 20 minutes to do this. Maybe we want to try and save time in some of our earlier answers, particularly calculations, and use that time or give it back to the 20 marker so that we can try and spend maybe 25 minutes, maybe even a little bit more on our 20 mark essays. But here's the recap. Here's the important thing to remember. We've got to build up the first argument, then we've got to question it. We've got to be balanced. We've got to say this first idea is really good, but then it has limitations. Then we repeat the process. We build up the second argument, we say what's good about it, and then we draw attention to its limitations. So we've really got this debate going about what the strengths and limitations of each option are, but then we show the examiner that we can make a decision at the end. We can make a judgment. In some essays, we might say that one option works better in the short run than the long run. In other essays, we might be a little bit more clear-cut than that and say, look, we really think that for this business, option A works better than option B. And here's my reason why, here's my justification. But hopefully that will help you with a structure that you can use to kind of feed into your 20 mark essays and help you do them. And hopefully that video will support you as you get ready for your examinations. We will see you soon for some more tutorials. In the meantime, you keep on taking the biz.